Thanks for joining me today. And for me, I'm in Central Time, so it's still morning, and for you guys, it's probably noon in your part of the United States. But thank you for joining. I hope this session is going to be informative, and we can share information. I like to have interactive sessions, so please feel free to either raise your hand, or even if you want to unmute yourself, since it's a pretty large group today, you can unmute yourself and ask a question throughout the conversation, because I certainly do not want to have your questions go unanswered, and there's no such thing as a dumb question. So let's have an interactive conversation today. So let's get started by understanding who the audience is, because we're actually talking about developing and negotiating research site budgets and contracts. And again, my name is Mary Vize. I am the owner and principal manager of Clinical Resource Consulting and Education Services, a consulting/education company designed exactly to teach the financial aspects to organizations and to participants such as yourselves. I am a certified public accountant by trade with over 20 years of experience in the clinical research finance space. I recently, actually almost 2 years ago now, retired from a large academic medical center where I spent a large portion of my career actually developing their clinical research finance program and their clinical research billing program. And when I left there, it had a 92% compliance rate. So I'm pretty proud of that aspect of it, and I left that organization and immediately started my consulting practice. I have over 30 years of financial and auditing experience. I am certified in healthcare research compliance as well as regular healthcare compliance. And of course, I understand all the aspects around the research billings aspects of it, and keep myself abreast of all of the regulations and laws that are associated with our practice today. So now that you know a little bit more about me, let's talk about who you guys are, and hopefully what I can begin to really understand exactly what you're planning to gain or hope to gain from this particular session. So is your particular job or position, and using the icons to your left, is your job or organization or position, with a site, a sponsor, IRB, or other? Looks like we have all sponsors. Okay, all right. So with that said, this was if you were a site, we're looking to see what type of setting you're in. But since you are all sponsors, I do want to make the caveat that this particular program is really designed to talk and target specific to sites, and for them to understand how to find hidden costs, how to appropriately set up their budgets, and negotiate them with you, the sponsor. So it's going to be a little bit of reverse role here. So even though you're with a sponsor/CRO, I do want to make sure that you are getting your money's worth from enrolling in this session. So please make sure you're stopping me, asking questions, but know that this conversation is mainly geared towards sites. Okay, so with that said, let's talk through the learning objectives with this particular, with this particular session. We're going to first of all talk about trial delays and those associated costs, because as you're a sponsor, you know that every single last day, hour means money to you as a clinical trial sponsor, trying to make sure that you're getting your particular product to the marketplace. And the only way you can get it to the marketplace is by actually doing the various phases of the trial as programmed as required by the FDA, and getting the data that the FDA and so many other regulatory bodies need so that they can approve your particular drug or device or compound in the marketplace. And so we're going to talk about those trial delays and those costs associated with that, but also kind of talk through later during the course, how do we reduce that? And again, it's mainly geared towards how do sites reduce that, but at least you can gain some insight as to how the sites are really going about, and should be going about, reducing their time to activation, but also how can they become much more efficient and effective. And again, you'll hear me talk about later during the talk, you'll hear me talk about the sponsor and the site being a partnership and being a working relationship that needs to be garnered, needs to be enriched and enhanced as well as nourished. And therefore, you can build trust over time and really have a strong partnership relationship. So you hear me talk about that because that by itself will gain you some time and some efficiencies and thus reduce the cost. We're also going to talk about some regulatory restraints. The Stark Law, Anti-Kickback Statute, also known as the AKS, and that notion of fair market value. What is that really, and how does that play into our particular budgets? Then we're going to look at how to negotiate the budgets and the various steps around the negotiation process. We're going to define those steps. We integrate the strategies for effective negotiation, review success factors, some risk associated with negotiations, and then discuss the ethical considerations around negotiations. Once we've done that, we'll talk about how the industry steady startup budget should be approached. So from a startup standpoint, what are we looking at as it relates to those particular budget presentations? We're also going to look at some basic contract content around those organizations that have state law requirements that they must abide by. So if you're dealing with large academic medical centers, oftentimes they do have state laws that they must abide by. We're going to look at institutional versus sponsor required language and how that particular aspect can get your contract really stuck in that legal pipeline. Talk about some boilerplate terms, indemnifications, and other agreements that can be used, such as data use, confidentiality, HIPAA requirements, and the use of those master agreements, which can go a long way. We won't spend a lot of time on that because the meat and the bulk of what I would love to talk to you about, again, is those budget presentations and how do you really effectively identify hidden costs. Look at steady startup process and how does that relate to your query resolutions and understanding the various aspects of your study and how that is going to impact the overall budget. We want to translate information into a study from a study document, into an actual study budget. How do we do that? How do we take those scientific terms and make them into financial terms that become financial dollars into your budget? And then plan for study amendments and procedural changes within the budget. Those final checks and balances that should be done from a site's perspective before they actually sign that agreement with the sponsor. And then we're going to also talk about some current hot topics around decentralized trials and how that will impact your clinical trial budgets as well as your agreements.